welcome to another wonderful episode of Paranormal Minds. I'm your host, Shannon, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being with me this week, and I hope that you've had a great week since I saw you last. This evening, we're joined with very special guest, Samantha Harris, and I want to tell you a little bit about Ms. Harris before I bring her in. In addition to Samantha Harris's 14 years plus of research and psychic experiences, Samantha Harris is a published author, demonologist, paranormal investigator, minister, spiritual healer, and counselor. Harris has been featured on the Travel Channel, Destination America Channel, and offered a series on the A&E Network, among other media outlets. From providing television producers with cases for episodes to acting as a resource for screenplay writers and author, Harris involves herself in the paranormal in hopes of educating and helping those in need. As of 2014, she has performed over 80 house blessings and counting. Harris has a background in abnormal psychology and received a BA from Michigan State University in communications. She has networked with renowned contacts such as Tracy and Lorraine Warren. And without further ado, I would like to welcome in Miss Samantha Harris. How are you doing, Samantha?
Hey, Shannon, good. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
I'm very, very glad you were able to join me this evening. And I kind of wanted to start off, I like to kind of start off talking with everybody about, what kind of contributed to your interest and led to your journey in the paranormal field.
Oh, gosh. I think it's a bunch of different factors. One thing really was kind of growing up with just different psychic experiences. I had a lot of death premonitions growing up, which might sound crazy to some people, but I almost had word-for-word accurate premonitions, and so that was kind of a more scary experience as a child, I guess. And then I also started to see, spirits and apparitions, shadow figures, things like that. And then it was about when I was 11 years old in like 7th grade or 6th grade, something like that, I went to a summer camp called Camp Algonquin. And that's like off of Burt Lake in Michigan. It's a beautiful property. And I remember having this weird feeling as I was taking this picture, and I didn't think anything of it really, kind of brushed it off. And it wasn't until like weeks later, maybe even months later, I was going through the photo album from the camp, and I see this image, a full apparition of a woman on the cork board in the picture. And mind you, there was like no plexiglass, no reflective surface or anything like that. So, of course, I was fascinated. I'm like, what is this? How do we explain this? And so we took it to a photography specialist that worked there for over like 30 some odd years. And he couldn't explain it. He's like, it's not a double exposure. It's in the negative. And he's like, I really think you captured a ghost. And then started sharing his own personal experiences. So from that kind of really intrigued me. And then in high school, I started doing investigations at cemeteries, things like that. And then my freshman year in college, I created a paranormal group up there and had so many different responses and requests for help. And so I kind of wanted to focus on performing house blessings. And then from there, I created the Michigan Paranormal Research Association in 2009 when I was at Michigan State. And from there, it kind of just took off, I guess, and there was just a lot of people in need. So, yeah, it was a long, long history.
So when you said that, I'm kind of backtracking a little bit, but you said you had death premonitions, at a younger age. Are you talking about your own death premonitions or like of other people?
It was like of other people, and it'd usually be like the day of or within like the upcoming week, basically. A real quick example is, my grandma had become recently widowed, and she had this really beloved golden retriever named Cody. And in my dream, which I didn't remember later on in the day, but in my dream, I was in my bedroom at my parents' home, and I saw the caller ID light up on the phone on my headboard. And as I go closer to the phone, I notice that my grandmother's name's on the caller ID. And I pick up the phone in the dream, and she's hysterically crying, and she says, "Cody's dying." And so I forgot all about it, woke up, it was probably in the afternoon, all of a sudden, deja vu. I'm at the foot of my bed, the caller ID lights up, it's Grandma calling, I pick up the phone, and she said, "Cody has cancer." And I was like, "Oh my God, Grandma." I was like, "I know this isn't comforting, but like I totally just dreamt that." And so that kind of freaked everybody out. And then I also had death premonitions about people that were close to me as well, too.
So would you say that those kind of death premonitions, is that a blessing or a burden?
Yeah, that's a good question, too, because I think a lot of people really do look at psychic phenomena and gifts like that as a burden sometimes. I think everyone can really tap into that. I think everyone's capable of having and using that sixth sense. But I think it's a gift in a way. It kind of gives you a heads up. No, it might not always be pleasant or, sunny and happy or whatever, but at least it kind of gives you some sort of foresight into what you might be dealing with. And to me, that's kind of helpful to prepare yourself, be ready to console these people, be ready to, blend in ear kind of thing, and just gives you a heads up, which I appreciate.
Now, one more question about these premonition things, because I didn't know about this previously.
Oh, sure.
Quick question. Would you say that out of all your experiences with your premonitions, have you ever had one that truly disturbed you and that you had a difficult time with?
Yeah, each one's upsetting because it's kind of weird. I get very empathic, like I can feel the other person's emotions or pain and stuff like that. And sometimes it's actually happened while I'm awake and driving, or about going about my daily business, and all of a sudden I'm filled with anxiety and depression. I start crying for no reason, and I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'm bipolar. What is this? And then I call somebody, and they'll be like, oh my God, yeah, this just happened, so-and-so just passed away or whatever. And it's like I can pick up on their emotions, and it's really hard to distance yourself sometimes or acknowledge that these aren't your own feelings because they feel so real. Mm-hmm. So they are kind of hard to kind of cope with.
Mm-hmm. So can you take a moment, I know we're kind of pinpointing at the present moment your death premonition abilities, but can you talk about, your abilities as a whole, the spiritual healer and the demonologist, all that at which you can do?
Oh gosh, yeah, I know it's like a whole mouthful, a list of things or whatever. Basically, to me, metaphysics, and the paranormal are way beyond, just like ghosts and demons and things like that we'll talk about later too. I'm a huge advocate for alternative healing, like including Reiki. I like to actually practice Reiki or healing with my hands and energy from a divine source, on my own animals, my pets. My bulldogs absolutely love it. So if they're in pain or something like that, I like to try to do energy work with them and make them feel better. But a lot of the times, I have people that come to me. Sometimes it's random, like you'll be in the grocery store and you just have somebody all of a sudden unload something like, oh my God, so-and-so just died and blah, blah, blah. I end up having like a 30-minute conversation with them, kind of comforting them and giving them like spiritual guidance, kind of reaffirming their belief that, yes, you're going to see your loved one again and stuff like that too. So sometimes it's random. Other times, people like to make appointments and do kind of life coaching, spiritual guidance stuff. I do practice different forms of divination, I guess. Like I like to give angel card readings to people if they're really lost and kind of stuck on trying to make a decision. And so I ask that their angels and spirit guides kind of guide them through the reading and give them the information that they need to hear. But most of the spiritual healing, honestly, takes place when I'm doing house blessings. A huge, to remove severe hauntings. A lot of it's actually counseling and working with the family because oftentimes they're very, very dysfunctional or going through very difficult times. And so that's kind of unique in how I approach it, is that, counseling is a huge part of healing and removing the haunting too, is getting the family to work as a team and get through these issues like alcoholism, substance abuse, depression, things like that as well.
I understand. You mentioned this briefly that you thought everybody had some kind or some type of psychic ability. Can you kind of take a moment to explain why you believe that and where that belief stems from?
Yeah, I think when we look at, children growing up and animals and things like that, our senses are a lot more heightened, I believe, when we're younger. And I actually have a colleague of mine that's actually studying what they call like wrinkles that are formed in children's brains, and they begin to expand as we get older. And they actually think there's a connection with the sixth sense and extrasensory perception being linked to these wrinkles and folds in the brain, and how as we get older, they kind of disappear, and that's what they think is the reason why people become like less psychic as they get older. But I honestly think it's environmental. I think that, it's like a muscle. If we don't use it, or we're told like, hey, you're crazy, it's just, a nightmare, go back to sleep, eventually we begin to tune out from that. But, they've proven ESP with a lot of different people. A lot of people have had deja vu, things like that, or had a dream and then it came true, different small premonition type things. And I just seen a lot of children that talk about things that they see or have had weird experiences they can't explain. And I just really think that everyone is gifted with that. It's just in Western society, we really don't utilize that, and it gets tuned out, I think. So just like different cultural beliefs, comparing, Western society to other areas in the world, and, just basically psychic occurrences and how we kind of just don't use it.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, and I would tend to agree with you there too, because correct me if I'm wrong here. I've kind of noticed the more, because I have my own paranormal group as well, and we started quite a few many years ago. But the more that I see people evolve within the field, like I never saw my own personal journey from the outside looking in. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
but I get to see other people's journeys, you know, looking in. And the longer that you're within the field and the longer that you become more in contact with these types of hauntings and these kind of things, and the more that you open up your mind to it, the more acceptable you are to, empathetic feelings and sensing and things like, you start to become more psychically open.
Exactly. That's how I think so as well. Like, it's a perception thing. It's being open-minded to it. Instead of just, when you don't think about something, you're not going to really be conscious of it. And, yeah, when you start to work with hauntings and start to kind of pick up on sensing of, is there a spirit in the home or not, people really tend to start to develop their abilities within these groups, I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would agree. I can walk into a place, of course, I've been doing this since I was a teenager, but I can walk into a place now and I can feel things that, even 7 years ago I couldn't feel or sense.
Right.
It becomes much more, you become more in tune with your own body, I guess is the only way I can describe it.
No, I think that's a perfect explanation and description of it, too, because, yeah, basically you're becoming more in tune, you're tapping into things that previously you probably would have just ignored. People just think, oh, I'm inside a house, no big deal.
Yeah.
And I think it's also kind of like a form of also like self-preservation, sometimes a defense mechanism too, that we're able to psychically tune into things like, for example, with the severe and demonic hauntings that I deal with, sometimes I think it's like a survival gift, like where I can sense these things because it's bad, I shouldn't be around that type of energy, and so my sixth sense kind of picks up on it as like a warning to myself.
Yeah, which, and there's a lot of people that ask, why do we investigate at night? A lot of to me, the truth of the matter is, you could investigate during the day. I mean, activity happens all the time, and we have equipment now that could even sense those things during the day. But it's almost like, to me personally, like a primitive thing. When you go in the dark, your other senses are more heightened in the dark, And I know a lot of these things happen more actively in the dark. But it also has to do with the investigator paying more attention because a lot of sensory deprivation in the dark.
Yep, exactly. And it's interesting, too, with people with disabilities, say that they're blind or deaf or whatever, their other senses will compensate for that lack. And so I think that's kind of exactly what happens, what you're describing, too, is, yeah, in the dark, we kind of tune in more. We try to strain our ears and our eyesight a lot more, to try to see if we can feel things, and also your psychic abilities as well, too. So, yeah, you definitely tap in a lot more and focus your senses, I guess, to kind of really pick up on what's actually in the home.
Mm-hmm. And start listening to yourself almost.
Yep, exactly.
Because that's the only thing you got to count on in there. So I want to kind of switch gears to your book, Fighting Malevolent Spirits. Excuse me, A Demonologist's Darkest Encounters. I do want to mention to our viewing audiences that Samantha's website has been up on your screen already throughout the evening and will continue to be as well. The web address is www.michiganpra.com. And you can find information about her book as well on Amazon, and that's the easiest way to buy it, from what I believe.
Yeah, and you get a discount, so that's a good motive for everyone.
Woohoo! So I do want to switch gears and start talking about your book, and kind of ask you what prompted you to want to write this book, because this is a kind of darker. I know this is the first book that you wrote, and it's kind of a darker, deeper book to write.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think it goes back a little bit. Over the years, I just had so many different requests, like, hey, I have this going on, or I have a very severe haunting. My, 12-year-old daughter is being attacked. What do I do? And it was very frustrating sometimes because these people would be, like, halfway across the country. Or, I've actually had people from, like, Africa or Europe and a lot of other locations that I just really physically can't make it to. And the other part, so I wanted to create the book, basically, to be able to help those people that I can't physically reach or be with. And the other big thing was I was really sad in a way that a lot of the clients that have contacted me have been turned down by their own church, their religious leaders, and other paranormal groups because they didn't know how to help or because they thought that they were crazy. Mm-hmm. A lot of the churches were like, we don't believe in that stuff, you're nuts, get off our property type of thing. Yeah. And, doing a huge disservice to these people. So anyways, I wanted to kind of consolidate what I've learned from each case, out of those most severe cases, characteristics for people to identify, how do you tell if it's a demon or a ghost type thing? Like, what are the differences? How do you discern between those two? And we talked about psychic abilities, but, like gift of discernment, things like that. But also, in the back of the book, they actually included in the appendix, it was actually supposed to be in the front of the book, was instructions for how to perform a house blessing. And, that might sound crazy to some people, like, well, I'm not a holy ordained individual. I'm like, honestly, you don't have to be. And that's kind of a rogue line of thought there. But, I've taught so many people online that have successfully done their own house blessings. I really do believe it's all about intention. It's about your faith. And it's really about standing up for yourself, your life, and your house. And so I really wanted to just create a book that would help people. And so I told my publishers, I'm like, well, it's a self-help book. And they're like, no, it's not. We're going to reorganize it into like a collection of like scary stories, and then, provide help at the back of the book. So basically I just never had seen a book like that, and wanted to help people. And that was a big, big motivation factor for me.
So, I like how you briefly mentioned the fact about other religious facets turning people away. I've experienced a lot of cases to where, religious leaders, preachers and stuff like that will come in and do quote unquote blessings on houses, and the activity gets worse. And
yep.
I'd say in about 10 to 15 cases that I know of, that some kind of religious leader of that facet of religion came in and did a blessing, I'd say 80% of them got worse. Do you have any kind of beliefs or recollections to why it gets worse when certain preachers or various religious leaders come in to do blessings? It gets worse.
And it's ironic because I've actually seen the exact same thing. And it's not like I'm trying to bash on religion whatsoever. It's just, I think a different approach is needed. Maybe being open-minded to other methods or combining methods, because I got a lot of flack for combining different religious methods, and they all work. So,
yeah.
So it's interesting. But I think at least with the negative and severe hauntings, whenever anyone reached out to like start praying or they went to church, like the entity or spirit would punish them. And so the activity would flare up because this person's reaching out to get help. Mm-hmm. And the entities, of course, like don't want that. They don't want to be removed from the home. They don't want to, have their whole fun, be stopped. But I think it's interesting. I think also a different thing that I kind of included in my method is that I include the clients in the blessing. Like we counsel for like an hour or more beforehand to figure out why this is happening, what's going on, what the state of mind psychologically is of the family, and work through some issues. Because when you have alcoholism or any sort of negative behavior, even chronic illness, that's a negative energy thing. When you have this low-level energy or habit or behavior, it creates like a foothold or a reason for the demons or entities to stay attached to you. So it's important to get rid of that first. And I don't think a lot of these ordained blessings include that element. Also, they don't seem to include the client in the blessing. Like, I view it as this is the client's fight. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to step up to the plate, and I'm going to guide you through this house blessing, but I need you to mean it. I need you to, like, call upon these, your divine entities that you believe in, God, Great Spirit, Allah, whatever, and work with me on this. And, a lot of the priests and reverends also don't use smoke. Sometimes they use, like, frankincense and myrrh and stuff, but a lot of times they just go through there with holy water, say a couple prayers, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Where I like to smudge the home, and smoke really is effective in driving out spirits, whether it's like white sage or incense, things like that. And be really thorough, just absolutely thorough as you can be. So, I mean, yeah, I just think it's a combination of things, and that it's not really addressing the key issues at play for the family to be able to get rid of the haunting.
And, it's really curious to me that you mentioned, the client participating with you, because my personal belief on a lot of this is, especially with the client cases that we work, because we deal primarily with client cases, that it truly is about empowerment. It's about empowerment of that client, whether you do that. I mean, I know a lot of times it does take a house blessing and certain types of, aspects for removal, but in most cases it doesn't even take those extreme measures if you can just give the client that empowerment that they are the ones that are in charge. There's nothing to fear.
Exactly, because I mean, you have to imagine how that feels too for these clients. I'm sure you've had experiences like this too, when your house is haunted. But how violating that feels, that you come home from work and you're like in this terrible situation where you can't relax. And it really is about reclaiming your house, your life, everything, and standing up for yourself. Because I really view these negative entities as bullies, and like kind of going back into like third, fourth grade years or something, like standing up to your bully and empowering those clients and helping to guide them to actually do that. And I think that's a very important part of the blessing as well.
And I noticed, you mentioned a lot of malevolent entities and stuff like that. And I kind of want to touch base with you on this, because I struggle a lot with the loose terminology of, things being demonic.
Right.
Because I personally feel, just from as long as I've been in the field, which hasn't been as long as most people, but because I'm not that old, I don't think.
Oh.
But
well, that's good. Yeah.
But since I was a teenager, and I've learned and had my journey along the way. But my principal fact here is, as I've made this journey, the loose terminology of the word demonic is thrown around so much now. Like, it's either not taken seriously, it's as a joke, it's as a sideshow, it's as a circus, or, God forbid you truly have these people that are living, this rare occurrence, but still living this situation, and it makes other people not believe them because the term is thrown around so much. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, especially for clients too, I'll have people contact me and they're like, well, something was thrown across the room and I have a demon in the house. I'm like, well, let's back up. We don't know that's that. Like, let's go through what you've experienced so far, and I go through a whole list of characteristics too. So I think ghosts, in a way, or any paranormal activity, has really been demonized. Everyone assumes it's evil and bad. And I don't mean to offend any listeners that believe that, all spirits are demons. But from my line of work and experiences and stuff like that, there actually is a difference, and I can actually discern between the two. But also with my experience too, I get handed more demonic cases than most people, because I kind of put a filter on the website being like, if you have a severe haunting and no one's been able to get rid of it, or if you think you're dealing with an actual demonic case, here's the characteristics, then call us, because it was just getting so busy. So I do see more than most, but honestly, there are very few demonic cases, in my opinion. They're pretty rare to come across, but when you do, you definitely know. You can definitely tell.
Well, it's kind of one of those things where I characterize it as because we are programmed instinctively with our morality to try to do good. And in my personal opinion, when you come across something of that nature, your insides almost revolt against it. And that's one of the only ways I know to explain it, is that like everything in you is revolting against what's the situation that you're in.
Yep, exactly. Like that feeling completely. And it's hard to explain it to some people, because they're, well, what are you talking about? Like, you definitely know when you come across it. And it's, like you said, everything inside you it completely revolts against it. I think I couldn't explain it a lot better than that. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, well, because, at the end of the day, though, I know everybody makes bad choices and bad mistakes. And I know certain spirits, it's like I tell people all the time, when Joe Bob dies, if Joe Bob was a smart aleck and an asshole, excuse my language, in life, just because he dies doesn't mean all of a sudden he's going to love unicorns and rainbows. So
exactly. That's right. Go ahead.
You got to put it in perspective here that is just as individualized as we are living. We're just as individualized dead.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I try to explain people with a metaphor. You walk down the street and you're going to meet some really great people, and you're going to meet some funky, nasty, negative people as well. And it's exactly like that on the other side. So you're going to see different types of spirits and stuff like that as well. So, interestingly enough, though, like psychic-wise, we were talking about intuition and stuff. I only tend to pick up on like the negative spirits, and I think again it's like a protection type thing. And very few times have I encountered like an angelic presence, but the contrast between the two is just like monumental. But it's a beautiful experience when you're able to encounter some beautiful, benevolent spirit that's just kind and loving, and to me that's like inspiring. I always love those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to your book, though, Fighting Malevolent Spirits, what types of encounters made it into your book?
basically just went over all my case notes from this binder, and I have all my like chicken scratch scribbling notes and stuff. So we're just kind of reading through things that I'd written down, and I'd forgotten details about some of these cases. So I really went through and found the most severe cases that I've dealt with to date, to me, that I believe were demonic. And so, out of the 80 some odd house blessings, there's about, I think, 8 or 9 cases in that book. And that kind of goes to show you the percentages, And there's been more cases after that as well, too. But I really just wanted to show the most severe incidences for people so that they can identify and recognize what to look for. So it kind of designed the book for, families and people in need, and then also paranormal investigators as well, too, or those who are curious, that maybe might be interested in this phenomenon. Like, does it actually exist? And so I wanted to give really good case samples and examples about, what demonic cases kind of look like, what people experience, what brought them in. And I really wanted to focus on, like, a psychological aspect in the book of, like, what drew these entities in, because there's almost always a reason. On occasion you'll find cases where people just moved into a house and it's severely haunted and there's a demon there. But most oftentimes there's something dysfunctional going on. There's something of negative nature, whether it's a habit or something like that, that draws the entity in. And I wanted to kind of give a heads up to people what to look for.
So what was the general time span of these encounters that made it into your book?
I started the first chapter with, like, my first experience with a demonic entity, and that was when I was about 17 years old, and that was probably back in 2006. Mm-hmm. So it's probably since, and then I think I jump a couple years, so it's probably from, including the first chapter, 2006, probably to 2012, I believe, maybe 2011, because it's about like a 2-year process to get a book published, which was absolutely insane and exhausting. But it finally got in there, so that was good.
So can you tell us of the details of the encounter in which you had to make the call to Lorraine Warren?
Yeah, basically I was at, like, my wit's end. This is probably the most severe case, in my opinion, just because it was so difficult to really end this chapter, end this whole case, in a peaceful, good way. Basically what happened, too, I would read about, incubi and succubi type things, and you kind of keep it in the back of your head and, like, well, maybe these things exist, maybe they don't. You're kind of skeptical. Mm-hmm. But it was a wholly different thing when I'm actually talking with this family and they're telling me about these violent sexual assaults that they were experiencing by these entities or entity. And, they had several ministers and priests in there. They had gone to church. Their church group said, we'll pray for you. We're not going to really do much more, but just come to church. And, people thought she was starting to go crazy. And basically, this woman, the mother's health was deteriorating so rapidly. I mean, she was only in her 30s and her hair turned white. She had gallstones. She had to go into the hospital for acute heart failure. And it was usually each time after she would try to go to church or pray that, she had these repercussions or seemed to be punished, basically. So it was a little bit crazy. And what really upset me the most was that her children, 2 out of the 3 children were being sexually assaulted. And we didn't know that until afterwards because no one really got to open up about it during counseling. They didn't feel comfortable. And the children weren't present actually during counseling. So there was a lot of things that I didn't like about how that case started. They had another group in there, a paranormal group, and they did several botched blessings. And then they stood up the family on 3 to 4 different occasions and then still considered that case as, like, their territory. And I'm like, well, this is crazy, Yeah. So anyway, so we had to call in an exorcism, and it was one of the only exorcists that was in the state of Michigan here, lowest part of Michigan. And he had an unsuccessful try at it. We had done a house blessing. It wasn't working for some reason. And later on, I theorized a couple reasons why this one actually didn't work that I include in the book. So anyways, I ended up calling Lorraine Warren, and she kind of went over some ideas of what we could do to proceed on how to help this family. And basically, we'd already done everything. So we were like, what do we do now, And at that point, basically, the client dropped off the face of the earth. I even checked the obituaries. I checked her number. It changed. Her address changed, like everything. And we were very close to that. If she was having an issue, she would have let me know. And we were right about to do another house blessing. And turns out she had been hospitalized and all this other bad stuff happened. And she didn't want to proceed with the house blessing after that. So it was a very, very severe case. As to date, I have heard from her again. and she's doing a lot better. And her and her husband at the time separated due to the entity as well too. So, but things were recovering, so that's good.
How do you come across, a spirit like that? Is it something that they moved into, or because that's kind of a rarity.
Yeah, and that was interesting because, the exorcist and I actually butted heads on this because he's like, well, it's because she's reading daily horoscopes. And I'm like, I find that very hard to believe. Okay, the three wise men were astrologers, okay? Like, we want to talk biblical stuff here. So anyway, him and I kind of did not see eye to eye. And what happened is how my theory behind it, she had a previous husband. So in the book, she's in her second marriage. Prior to that, she'd been married to a guy that practices dark arts, like Santeria and other things, and the darker side of it. And apparently, Clarissa, the woman, the wife, said that after moving into her new home and after her wedding, she received a text message that said, like die now type thing, and that, hey, I hope you're enjoying the new home. I hope it's comfortable. And it turns out, in our theory, that he actually sent some sort of entity or spirit towards her, and kind of inquired about it, hinting that he had done it. He'd be like, oh, how's the new house treating you? Like, do you have any extra company? Questioning things like that. And so I really do believe it was something of his actions that led to this haunting.
Do you believe that is truly realistic, though? That, I've never experienced a case like this, and I'd assume it'd be a rarity, that someone has the ability to send something like that to you?
It's interesting because I think our minds are capable of so many amazing things, and then you start to go into a paranormal realm. I always have to say everything's possible until I can prove it to be wrong. It really seems like that. I've seen people, when I've studied different religions and cultures from around the world, and I've visited different places around the world, and I've read cases about this and seen people that, that believe in curses and stuff like that, and they actually start to physically manifest these things. Now, whether it's a placebo effect or not, that's a whole different story. It's harder to prove that way. But I do think that when people send out intentions, that things can actually manifest. And I do think that, yes, entities can be summoned. For example, using a Ouija board, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So if you are practicing, these darker things and have the perceived power over these entities, and I don't think anyone does have power over them, but that by using your excuse to go visit or infest a home, those entities use that opportunity. And I do think, yes, that they can be summoned and sent and bad things, I guess.
Yeah, and that's kind of scary, too.
Right, exactly. Well, there's always spiritual protection. Good always conquers bad in my book, so so that's good.
And I know that you said briefly that you believe alcoholism and really bad habits lead to demonic and dark attacks. Is there anything else that you believe opens an individual up to these type of demonic or dark attacks? Do you think it could be generational? How do you think that kind of works?
Yeah, there's actually a different theory, too, that I've read about. It was in a really good book called The Dark Sacrament, but basically there's a thing known as ancestral hauntings or ancestral demonic hauntings, in which, the entity basically moves its way down to each family member through the family over the years. Mm-hmm. But there's different ways. If people are messing with the occult, in an unprotected way, say the Ouija board, for example, and they don't protect themselves, I think it's kind of like being a telemarketer and you're calling all these numbers and you don't know who's going to answer, and, these entities are waiting for opportunities like that. So sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes people just move into a home. Other times people, as bizarre as this sounds, actually have a chronic illness, and after being at the hospital, they were followed home by something, and then it turns very severe. Other times, too, even religious, very holy men and women, these priests and ministers, sometimes these entities decide to take it on kind of as an egotistical thing, I'm haunting a priest or a reverend and torturing them and tormenting them, and that's kind of like bragging rights, I guess, in their spiritual world. So sometimes it's just random coincidences. Sometimes people just happen to have something follow the home, but it's very, very rare. This is not typical stuff, so I don't want people freaking out thinking it's common.
Yeah, and it's not. And it is a very, I know that it's a mainstream terminology now that it is used very loosely, but it is a rarity.
Right, exactly.
So, being frank, out of all the people that you've helped, what is the likelihood that their lives are going to go on to be normal?
Honestly, out of the 80-some-odd house blessings, only 2 of the house blessings didn't work. Other than that, everyone actually has been like happily ever after. And to me, that's very inspiring and encouraging. But I always give the kind of little lecture before I go. I'm like, don't go and try to see if the haunting's still in your home. Don't go and start doing EVP recordings and stuff like that in your house, trying to summon things or communicate with it. I'm like, just let it be. You've gone through a really difficult time, and I actually compare it to being part of the witness protection program. I'm like, forget about that part of your life. Like, don't even deal with it anymore and just move on. Like, don't spend any energy or time thinking about that entity. Like, you have to move on from it. So honestly, most often, 98% of the cases actually have moved on to a really good, happy life, and they've gotten their stuff together. But there's been the 2 cases, and of course there's several theories on why they didn't work. But you have to have the client participate and want to and be willing to do the house blessing, to be on board. And when you don't have that, I can't guarantee, that it's going to work. And that's kind of what happened.
It's really interesting to me that you mentioned clients after the investigation, doing EVP sessions and stuff like that, because I've noticed within the past 5 years a huge influx, and I would say 3 out of 4 people that contact me are clients, are people that are doing EVP sessions and trying to make contact with these things in their homes. And I'm talking even cases that we don't even necessarily take because these people won't listen. And in my eyes, what is the point of me going into your home trying to help you when you're not going to heed my advice?
Right, exactly. So, and I understand that, curiosity that they have, and I think that's understandable for a lot of people. So, but you can't ward them off from doing that. And sometimes they're very stubborn and just want to stick with that plan. So it's kind of difficult. So.
Well, in my personal opinion, it's extremely dangerous because it's like I've told other people, we don't investigate where we live. We do our thing and then we go home. If I was having some kind of problem in my house, I'd call in another team. Doing that type of investigation within your home like that, you're opening yourself up even more. To me, there's the same thing as using a Ouija board in your home.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's how I feel about it, too, because I'm like, I would never kind of open up that spiritual door, at least doing stuff like that in my own home, because that would just freak me out. Like, I like to have the belief that, my home's safe or whatever, and if people actually read the book, they realize that a couple times that was kind of violated. But, yeah, exactly. I like to think of it as my sanctuary, and so I don't understand why some people are like, hey, let's do it in my house. I'm like, you should go elsewhere, and you should be a lot more smart about it and try not to welcome in things, Well,
I've had actual clients where the activity has gotten so much worse. Like, it went from, little bumps in the night to they started doing crap like this, and they were in full-on, they were being attacked by these spirits. And to me, it's just opening yourself up, and I don't even know if it was the same spirit that started with the little bumps in the night. It could have been something totally different after you open yourself up like that.
Right, exactly, and that's why I always warn people about that too. I'm like, make sure you some sort of spiritual protection, as goofy as that sounds to people. Once you open up those doors in a way, you don't really know what's going to be coming through, and so that's why I just try to have people heed that advice and try to be as smart about it as possible and safe. And I understand the importance of kind of diving into the paranormal because it is fascinating. People are curious, and I don't look down upon or frown upon people trying to investigate, but just be smart about it.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. But being smart about it's not being smart about it in your home.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a big message that is not out there enough, because I'm telling you, over the past 5 years, the influx of people doing that crap in their home that have came to me has, gone tripled, if not quadrupled. And for years, I never even heard of anybody trying to investigate in their homes. And then all of a sudden, in the past 5 years, it's like 3 out of 4 people that contact me had done EVP sessions in their home. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yep, exactly. And I've noticed also, I think, unless it's the fact that more people are just open to talking about it, but it seems like there's been a large increase in activity just in general as well, too, more inquiries, but, it could just be that it's more of a acceptable topic, I guess, now, and not so demonized, I guess.
Well, I know that you live in Michigan, but here in Georgia, where I am at, it is still rather taboo to talk about. You have certain circles of people that, because we're here in the Bible Belt, and they believe that any kind of spirit or any kind of interaction with spirit is demonic, hands down, And so, it's become less taboo in certain regions of the country. I will say that. And I think for certain people, it's become less taboo. But I still believe there's a resistance to it in a lot of sense. I meet a lot of clients that if they have something going on in their house, they're moving out. It doesn't matter what I've said to them. And it's just because of that religious belief, that true religious belief that anything spiritual is demonic.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, it's interesting too, and I hate doing like religious debates with people because I really do try to accept and appreciate everyone's views and beliefs. But you know, even in the Bible, it talks about the gift of discerning in Corinthians, which means that there are difference in varieties between spirits and entities. Like not everything is demonic. You know, there's good spirits and there's bad spirits. You know, and it even talks about human spirits in the Bible. When I think it was Solomon or King something. Actually had a psychic summon the old king and woke him up, and he's like, "Why are you disturbing me?" And it wasn't a demon; it was the king's spirit. So, you know, if they really are thorough and read the whole Bible, you know, there's lots of different case examples in there that really kind of actually differ what they believe. So,
yeah.
So it's interesting, but I totally understand most people don't do that. They just have this stigma against it, and that is difficult to deal with.
It's rather difficult to deal with, especially in the Bible Belt.
Right.
But I do want to kind of shift gears and talk about the how-to section that you included in your book. I know you've briefly talked about it and mentioned it, but what type of how-to section are we talking about? Are we talking about a how-to section for investigators, for clients? Where's that going?
Basically, it's a how-to section for honestly anyone that's interested in using it. You know, paranormal investigators, families that want to kind of rid their homes of these types of hauntings. And really, it's there's two different sections in the appendix. And the first one is like preparing for a house blessing. And I had to put in all these little kind of like addendums and things to warn people, like, hey, if you're an alcoholic and you're raging out of control, I'm not gonna, you know, this house blessing might not work for you because you're not addressing and dealing with this negative behavior or some sort of thing that's going to prevent this blessing from being successful. So I try to go over guidelines for people, what's going to be the most effective method for them and what they need to do to prepare for that. Because it's not something that, oh, I want this thing gone and I don't have to change any lifestyle that I'm currently living in. You know, they have to make an effort. They have to wholeheartedly want this to change and to be on board with it. And then the second section is really just step-by-step instructions for how to perform a house blessing. And this is just a method that I created. And in no way am I saying, like, oh, this is, you know, the only one. It's the best way to go. It's just what I've kind of combined and put together with Native American Christian Catholic and South American methods that, to me, were the most potent. And so that's why I combined them. And it seems to be very effective for people to use.
Mm-hmm. So, excuse me, my throat is like on fire tonight. I know there's a question and answer section of your book too. What kind of, you know, what kind of makes up that area?
And this is something I wanted to stick in the back of the book and then actually put the how-to sections in the beginning so the producers or publishers didn't agree with that. So it got reorganized a little bit. But the question and answer sections really kind of addresses what we were just talking about, like how do you know if it's like a demonic or a severe negative haunting? How do you know if it's just a human spirit? And so it really helps people discern between the two. It also answers questions about, like, how does a haunting like this come about? How does it originate? Like what kind of behaviors attract entities so that people can kind of steer themselves away from such behavior and kind of protect themselves a lot better. And it just answers, like, you know, things like about poltergeist, you know, what type of characteristics to look for with that, and just different theories on it. But basically asking and, you know, people asking, like, well, what is a demon? And so we have some different theories included in the book as well, too. So we just kind of went over everything, and I wanted to kind of answer the most common questions that I usually receive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to talk about your personal, you know, work on the side, I should say, you know, being on the Travel Channel and Destination America and stuff of that nature. Can you kind of take a moment just to kind of talk about, like, what you did on each one of those and what kind of led up to that?
Yeah, you know what, I used to always steer away from, like, television stuff because I'm like, oh, God, you know, I don't want to be, like, stuck on TV or give bad impressions or be misleading or something like that. And I always had this fear of, like, Hollywood, you know, corrupting a lot of things. And, you know, I've worked with so many producers over the years, too, that they are kind of corrupt, you know. Mm-hmm. And just like anything in Hollywood, it kind of gets ruined over the years. So what I was first asked to film for was actually for the Travel Channel, and it was most terrifying places in America. And a lady that I know runs an amazing restaurant. It's actually called the Holly Hotel. It's in Holly, Michigan. It is like one of the most haunted places I've ever been. And out of like, the 9+ times I've been there, something always happens. So I used to host events for her, and she actually had a producer inquire if they would like to be part of that episode and have a feature on their hotel. So anyway, so Christy Cutlianos, or Christy Haas, actually asked me to come in there and act as their basically like public speaker, because I knew the history of the property and had worked in there numerous times, so she wanted me to kind of speak for her. So that was the first thing. I was offered the direct sequel to Paranormal State on the A&E Network, I think when I was a senior at Michigan State University, so that was probably, I think it was a junior, so probably 2009. And we were on our way to film the actual pilot, actually our first episode, and they handed me this 13-episode contract that was, like, super shady, and I was like, I can't sign this. And then I was asked if I could, like, fabricate or recreate evidence, which to me is, like, a huge kick in the mouth to the rest of the paranormal community when we worked so hard to generate, valid, credible evidence. And I was like, I just can't do this. I don't want to sell out just to, be on TV. But I'm currently working on something right now. And previously, before that, I had an episode featured on one of my cases that's actually in the book. And that was on Discovery Channel's A Haunting, but was moved to Destination America Network, the sister channel.
Do you there? Or did I lose you?
Oh, no, I'm still there. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Phew, I always get worried about, like, these connection issues. You just have no idea. Well, actually, it's pretty bad because, like, last week, my Skype debacled me. But this week has been tech-free issues because I said no more Skype for right now because I mentally cannot handle it.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I need something to go smoothly here.
just one show goes smoothly, and it's a compatibility issue between Skype and Windows 8, and it's just not nice sometimes. But I noticed that you do a lot of events, and I'm sure you're out there promoting your book. Once again, it's Fighting Malevolent Spirits, a Demonologist's Darkest Encounters, and you can buy that on Amazon, and you can learn more about Samantha Harris at www.michiganpra.com. But I know you do go to a lot of events and, try to, get your book out there. But do you have any kind of big events coming up that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, we were actually going to do the Western Canada Paracon event, but eventually I think that got postponed or canceled, so I'm still waiting to hear an update on that. If not, we are actually going to be doing it next year that we have coming up. Also this fall, I'm going to be in Ann Arbor and basically all sorts of different areas of Michigan kind of doing fall Halloween events. I just actually moved up to Traverse City, Michigan, and looking to do some fall events up here and hopefully do like an expo. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's just like the television stuff in a way. I like these expos, but sometimes it's kind of cliquey in a way in which if you don't know anybody, they're not going to bring you in. And sometimes the same group kind of travels with each other through each expo. And so sometimes I get a little nervous. I'm like, I don't know, are we really here to talk about, profound evidence, the different theories, or are we just here, to have a party?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. And so sometimes I kind of steer away from those things. But it's a lot of fun, and I do like to do that. And I kind of feel like shameful about like trying to promote the book. I really did write it to help people, and just so people know, like, you don't really make much money whatsoever on published books. I think you get like $1.78, which I'm gonna be rich on. So but it's really to help people. So yeah, I do like to travel and promote things, to do different book signings. I'm hoping to set up a book signing tour throughout Michigan and possibly like the surrounding states, and then eventually. If we do this TV show, I'm sure we're going to be having a lot of other tours in the future as well.
And what kind of TV show are you looking at doing?
So, of course, they're like, you can't talk about it because otherwise, Lord happens I get sued or something. But it's kind of interesting. It's a new take on the paranormal. A part of it actually incorporates one of my dream show concepts and includes like spiritual education, learning, and metaphysics in general. Which I think is extremely exciting, in addition to, paranormal investigating and all this other stuff. So it kind of wraps together 3 different segments and includes like a personal life segment, kind of like Long Island Medium, where you get to know the family, you get to know the friends, their personal life. And then I also kind of take you guys on a magical mystery tour with this metaphysical studies. And I think that is kind of what people are hungry for, is that spiritual nourishment and learning, in the paranormal spiritual world, and kind of focusing on like a positive positive aspect of things, and I think that it's something that people are really looking forward to.
So do you have any other books that you're going to be working on in the future? Any ideas for any books, or is this going to be your only one?
Yeah, so I have two. I need to focus my efforts here because I have two books that I'm starting to write, and one of them is kind of like a personal life story book that is not related whatsoever to the paranormal community, but it's a series of kind of darkly humorous stories and experiences of my life. But in terms of spiritual and paranormal books, I started working on another book that's kind of like the opposite of my most recent book, or the last book here, with Fighting Malevolent Spirits. This one actually focuses on like the lighter side of things and a lot more positive things, you know, like angelic encounters, kind of like life mantras and karmic lessons, and kind of why we are here on Earth, and like what our missions are, and you know, how to live a more fulfilling life, and kind of just sharing more of a divine and positive approach, I guess, is what the book will be focusing on.
What would, if you had to compare and contrast the two books, what do you think people would be more pulled to gravitationally wise? Would they be pulled to the Malevolent Spirits, kind of the darker book, or the lighter book?
It kind of depends. You know, scary stuff really does sell. You know, a lot of people love going to the movie theaters and watching some terrifying movie, you know, and it gets their adrenaline going and stuff like that, too. But then you have people that are like, I don't even want to read that stuff because then I can't sleep at night. And I've had a lot of people write me being like, I can't sleep anymore, you know, like your books terrified me. And so I feel terrible about that, but it really is to help people. I think probably sensationalized stuff, you know, like scary things really probably does sell more. But I really think we should take a turn in the paranormal community and really focus on the positive and healing things, you know, whether it's alternative healing, whether it's like spiritual counseling, divine encounters with like angelic beings, you know, things like that really motivate and uplift people. I think that's something that's really good to actually focus on a lot more of.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think that focusing on the good aspects of it, not necessarily the negative and possibly demonic areas, could hopefully maybe kind of change the majority viewpoint of the population, you know, in the United States currently, because everybody is focused so much on the negativity.
Right, exactly. And if you think about intentions and like energy levels and energy vibrations of people, as goofy as that sounds, like we really do kind of lower ourselves when we're constantly like in fear and stuff. And it's interesting to see kind of the New Age movement as well with people that are kind of working on focusing to, you know, manifest happiness, you know, happier stuff, and that somehow that'll like end up changing the world, which is an interesting theory. So it'd be great to see if that actually happens.
Yeah. I think that as long as we're all plugged in though and believing everything that we read on either social media, that we're all doomed, quite frankly, because nobody questions anything anymore. They just believe everything they see. Oh, there's this is the one that just got me. I saw it on all these Facebooks and everything, where there was this demon standing over this person's dying body in the hospital and was caught on a nurse's camera. How many hospitals logistically have the money to install nurses' cameras like that? Even in the ICUs here at where I'm at, where, you know, they have we have great health care in my area. There is no cameras in these ICUs, okay? They have heart monitors that run outside where people monitor them and their stats, but there's no camera. Please explain to me. I mean, people don't question anything anymore. It's just like, okay, I'm going to just believe this. And it's really scary to me that it's just so easily believable, because I personally, when I see stuff like that, I don't believe it right off the bat. I don't, because it's just I've become so jaded to all these. I mean, if it's not one business owner on TV, it's another business owner on the news saying my drive-through restaurant's haunted, you know? And
exactly.
It's about publicity for them, and it's just. Now, I believe the person who comes to me in private a lot more than I do believe the one that goes and flaunts it on TV.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because you have to look at people's motives as well. Like, yeah, they're going to be getting some sort of publicity or payment or money for it. And so, yeah, it is scary, you know, people's sheeple type attitude where we just believe what we're fed. And so I think it's a wonderful point to make and kind of wrap up with is exactly that people really should question things. Not everything is as it appears, and yeah, not everything is. You know, in my case, you know, dealing with like demonic or severe hauntings, a lot of this stuff can be explained. So I think it's a great attitude and mindset to really have and to question things.
Yeah, and if you want to question me and Samantha Harris, go for it. I encourage you to question me. I'm completely okay with that. I'd rather it be a question than every word that comes out of my mouth be believable. So.
Right, exactly.
It's just because I'd rather be questioned and my validity be taken into question than just people blindly, to me it's like being a robot almost. Just believing, just like I take any information, I'll accept anything that you say. Okay, master, thank you, man. It's the uniformity and the conformity that I do not understand.
Yeah, exactly. I know, and that's what scares me. I think it's kind of how we're raised, I guess, in Western society too. You know, like with group schooling, it's competitive, and people are just kind of brainwashed in a lot of ways, whether it's at the workplace or not. And I think we kind of get tired and we're tapped out, and we're exhausted, and people just kind of are used to receiving instructions and not questioning authority, not questioning different motives. And it kind of just leads into a giant disaster of people just being spoon-fed all sorts of stuff, whether it's real or not. And I think it's definitely unhealthy to have.
Yeah, and just because it's on the internet does not make it true. I'm sorry, I gotta say it.
Right, exactly. I know, yeah. The internet has been a blessing, but also a curse in some ways as well, too, because, so many people repost things that are not even true. Like, sometimes just go to Snopes.com, like, try to look up something. Some of these memes or whatever are not even real, or posters and facts and tidbits. So it's really interesting just to take a minute and realize something's just viral and actually fake,
Yeah, it absolutely amazes me daily, Miss Harris. I will definitely say that. So I want to thank you so much, Samantha, for joining me this evening.
Oh, well, thank you, Shannon. It was absolutely a pleasure, and I appreciate talking with you.
And once again, Samantha's book is called, let me get her website up on the screen, too, as I'm saying it, Fighting Benevolent Spirits. And it's Samantha Harris is her name, and her website address is www.michiganpra.com. The website is up on your screen right now, and like we said, you can get the book on Amazon, or you can check out more about Samantha if you'd like to contact her through her web address at michiganpra.com. Once again, Samantha, thank you so much for being on with me. I really did appreciate it, and it was a quite fun chat.
Oh, good. Well, thanks so much, Shannon. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in this evening, and be sure to tune back in to Paranormal Minds, same time, same place. See you guys. Bye.